And good morning, fellas. And um, Carl, good morning. I see you just joined us. And Steve, thanks again for that hymn. You're exactly right. It fits marvelously with what we're engaging in within John's Gospel. We're in week 238, looking at John 18, um, 15 through 18. And I've entitled this session, It's Okay, He's With Me. And we'll read the text like we always do. And this morning, maybe I'd like to ask one of you guys to go ahead and engage the text, read it. It's dark and cold in more ways than one. So if we could read it from that perspective. And so would one of you read the text and then we'll get started.
And Simon Peter and another disciple were following Yeshua, and that disciple was known by the high priest, and he entered together with Yeshua into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter had stood outside at the door. Then the other disciple, who was known by the high priest, came out and spoke to the doorkeeper, and she brought Peter in. Then the doorkeeping maid said to Peter, "Are you not one of the disciples of this man?" He said, "I am not." And because it was cold, the servants and the attendants, having made a charcoal fire, had been standing, and they were warming themselves. And Peter was also standing with them and warming himself.
Good. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. Well, first of all, an overview. And I find this entire narrative just absolutely fascinating. This particular portion, 15 through 18, full of irony and what I call human color. It's dark and cold. Jesus is being led by the arresting party. Peter and one other disciple are following the entourage. The arresting party arrives at the court of the high priest. Peter remains outside, but is then coached inside. Peter is taking quite a different role here, and that's what we're going to look at. He's questioned by a non threatening source, this young servant girl, doorkeeper. He lies. Peter joins the others seeking warmth by the fire. That's a 30,000-foot view of the flow of the text, 15 through 18. The setting and the text, and Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple, and that disciple was known by the high priest. We don't know who that is, but it very well could have been the young apostle John. That's kind of his style. He entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. Jesus, the creator, is led as a prisoner by his own creation. This ties right in with Steve's hymn. There's an immense tension in this very idea. The one with ultimate authority is submitting himself willingly to human authority, two types of authority. Now, this is my take on this, fellas, so bear with me. I don't believe Jesus is veiling power. In my mind, I want Jesus to sneak into a phone booth and change and put his cape on and overpower these bad guys. That is the power of this world because I think in those terms. And I think that's common. I think Jesus is very much in control and his power is not veiled, it's being demonstrated. And there are that's not a subtle difference, that's a large difference. He is demonstrating power from my perspective, what is referred to elsewhere in the New Testament as kingdom power. So he's demonstrating a different type of power of which we are in the midst looking at two types of power. Last couple weeks we talked about power. We're relating the term path. We talked about the power path as one kind of power. Jesus would say the kingdom or the power of this world versus kingdom path, or what I'm calling the cruciform path in the form of the cross. So we could use the term cruciform path, kingdom power. They're all lumped together with the same idea, but we're building a contrast. And as the narrative develops, we'll be looking at various aspects of each and learning about each. And of course, this introduces what is to come, the cross itself, and the all-powerful God embracing weakness. Thus, Steve, your hymn this morning. No one is taking his life from him. He is willingly giving his life over, as stated in Philippians 2, 6 through 8. Peter's following. Well, of course he is. Peter's been with Jesus, and that has made all the difference inside Peter. Of course he's following Jesus. However, inside Peter, inside his being, his world is falling apart. He has been on a bandwagon during the 3-year ministry of Jesus, and his wagon has now suffered a snapped axle, bringing his world, as he understands it, to a jolting halt. Thus is why we see a quite different Peter within this text. He's present with Jesus. Of course he is. He's a follower of Jesus. But he's also powerless. And that's something Peter has not known. So what Peter knows, we're going to do an illustration, and it will unfold as we develop this. Here's Peter, and this could be me, and this could be you. Peter is in our picture. And what Peter knows could be illustrated by these two lines, two parallel lines in close proximity to his height, which would be his capacity. And what he knows dwells between those two lines. Because all of us know a portion of what is actually a very, very minute portion of what is actually real and true and comprehensive. And Peter has that experience. He has that knowledge. And what he knows dwells between those two lines, just like you and me. And so us people, are most receptive to ideas within this realm. Persons or ideas. And outside of this realm, we people reject. We clamp down and we say, no way at all is that true. And this is something about just a truth about humanity. Now, to take this idea one step further, I've always understood that we have a capacity, being human, to understand 10% beyond my experience. 10%. I've heard this for years and taught it. I actually teach this. But I looked at it online, did a series search and looked up some articles, and that is generally true, but it's a little broader and it's not definitive. But educators, cognitive scientists, those people who are in the know say that is generally true, but the openness factor is not a flat 10%. It's really a variable of 5 to 15%. So on a good day, what this is saying, on a good day, I'm open to something that's 15% outside of my experience. And if not, I'm not going to be the nice guy and welcome dialogue. I'm going to tend to reject it or push back against it and not even hear it. Now that is part of the human, being human, the human dilemma. So Peter has gone through, we've watched him now for 18 chapters, and we've watched him function within the realm of the discipleship group is kind of a, I would look at Peter as kind of a staff sergeant. He's the, he's not a commissioned officer. He's really, I wouldn't call him the lieutenant. I mean, you could. I think he functioned. He's a guy in the trenches. He's a guy that gets things done. And that's how the Gospels depict him. Um, and so, what Peter's experience has been that he's dealt with during the course of the Gospel ideas and people represented by the two images. And when he finds an idea outside of his realm of understanding or experience, what Peter does is he fires a Peter bullet. Boom. And that bullet is designed to bring that idea back into correlation with what he understands. His world, he is altering it to bring in to the realm of his understanding. And this is not only Peter's experience, it's our experience as well. So, what is also true is with people, he's interacted with people, and if people are not in compliance with what he feels is true within his parallel lines, he will then fire a Peter bullet and bring the bullet represents the force. It's the idea of exertion of power. And we're looking at the power that we're all familiar with. And he exerts power to bring that other into compliance with his way of thinking. And that's Peter. That's what Peter's, how he has operated, not the subtotal or sum total, but it is a depiction. Now, we can derive a few things from this idea, and we're going to carry this idea out. Thus, what we can learn from this little graphic is that when power is exerted, as demonstrated by the Peter bullet, the power is exerted to bring the other, which would represent, the guy, the idea and the person, with how the one, Peter, needs the other to be. So the whole idea is as Peter goes through life is bring whatever is out of alignment into alignment. And that is, you do that through the exertion of power that I've got graphicked as the little Peter bullet. Now, something happens. And this goes to the law of our physical world, the laws of physics, that whenever power is exerted, it weakens the source. And that's kind of a given. We live in a world that is depicted by loss and replacement. That's why we have batteries in a flashlight. That's why we put fuel into our cars, because when power is converted and transformed and works for us, that energy source needs to be replenished. And so now power has been exerted through his Peter bullets, and now he's weakened. He's at a lesser state power-wise. We're talking about power here. Power returns to Peter. Again, this is what we've seen prior. Power has been returned to Peter through two ways: motivated reasoning I told you, and social support, or in this case, compliance. He fired a bullet and he won. Yeah, brought the idea back in. Oh, this is the way it is. Or uh, a wayward person, he's brought that person back into the way that he thinks that person should be, social support. And so what Peter represents is he's in a fellowship of disciples where he's receiving positive feedback, social support, and it just supports or uh, amplifies his motivated reasoning. I told you I was right, that kind of thing. And so this has a positive effect, and it has a really negative effect on Peter and on you and I. Now, here's a side note. Let's see, I got to bring this up here. Here's a side note, totally off game here, but if this is true, and according to this little diagram here, what this is saying, that the growth possibility or the well-being of the community is limited to the one's experience. So this really ties into leadership. When I had a business for 40 years, and I was stuck a lot. I got so bored with this whole thing, and it took me until probably in my 60s, or at least late 50s. I would call it my 60s. I've been doing this a long time, and it really, I started to understand the limitations that we were experiencing as a company wasn't the company's fault. It was because of my own limitations. I was limiting what that could be. And I think that is a general truth in regard to our own interactions with other people. My realm, I was a business owner, and that business was suffering because of me. So now we shift, and we now look at why a different Peter. We're seeing a different Peter. We looked at what has been for 18 chapters, actually 14 chapters, beginning with the upper room. We have a transition happening. But now we have quite a different Peter. I mean, we're really seeing some different demonstrations by Peter. In chapter 18, Peter is experiencing powerlessness. And I think that we're safe to say that. And it's because his world is not responding to how he's framed it to be. Peter is no longer in charge and has his 6-shooter with Peter bullets, because when he shoots, no one's responding. He is now brought into a different world context. His context is different, and we're seeing a different Peter. And there's absolutely zero support. So Peter is weak. Peter is powerless. And Peter resorts to fear. Peter is in fear, just like the arresting party are in fear. Fear is demonstrated through two things here within this text. He's hiding who he really is. He's a follower of Jesus. And he's lying. And then he seeks comfort through a device of his own choosing. Now, that one I'm pushing. That one I'm using a metaphor to press a point, and you can do with it what you wish. But I think it's so interesting, the detail around the fire they built for themselves. I think this is human nature. I think when it's cold and dark, what we tend to do as people is using our constructs, what we understand, and we build a charcoal fire so we can warm ourselves by that fire, a device of our own choosing. So that's the metaphor, and I think it's worthy to think about. So this is where Peter is. A weak Peter now being brought into compliance to the other's world. And he warms himself. Now, one last note, and I've already mentioned this to you guys. From my perspective, what is true of Peter is definitely true of those within the text. We have a cross section of humanity represented by the slave on one side and the officers, the less entitled to the more entitled, as a cross section of humanity. And they have all built the fire to warm themselves. Well, of course, they're doing it because it's cold. Understand, I would be standing by it too. But I think it's a metaphor of how this idea could be transferred to not only Peter, but to those present and to, as it says here, you and I. Now, Peter's journey, and this is the last slide that we'll be looking at to do a comparison. The comparison is Peter, the prior Peter, in chapters, 1 through 18. The prior Peter, represented by the early portion of the slide I just showed, and the powerless Peter. There's a contrast, very different Peter. And let's do some comparisons here. So the prior Peter was the confident disciple. I tried to word these as contrasting ideas. Confident disciple in the text, John 13:37, Peter is quite confident. I will lay down my life for you. No one is going to do this to me. I will do it. That is the Peter that we see in John 13. And now, quite different, we've got a conflicted disciple, conflicted follower. Conflicted meaning he is following, but he is following from a distance. And the confliction really becomes pronounced in his denial, his first of three: I am not his disciple, so get off my back. He is walking, his feelings are right below the surface because he's in pain, because his world is not responding to what Peter is used to. On the left-hand side, the second comparison is that Peter was the eager defender. John 18:10 is, it's huge in that there's where in the garden, Peter draws his sword and he cuts off Malchus's ear. I mean, that is quite an aggressive act. And that represents where Peter was, eager defender. But now something has occurred. He's following from a distance, and he becomes the quiet denier. John 18:18. He is blending in, and he's warming himself at the fire, powerless. He is weakened, a powerless, weakened Peter. On the left-hand side, the next comparison is he's a close companion. We know that. We've seen him for 18 chapters. John 13. And what I chose was just a graphic or an image that would depict this idea. There are numerous examples. But at the Lord's Supper, John 13:23-24, he is seated in close proximation. This is the idea of proximation to Jesus, physical proximation. He's close to Jesus. Whereas in contrast, in the powerless Peter here that we observe in this text is he's a distant observer. He's following from behind. He has to gain access through another disciple. It's okay, he's with me. Follows at a distance, and he relies on the other disciple for access. And I think that's a telling image. Jesus was close, Jesus is now far. And it has a diametrically damaging effect on Peter's image of who he is and his world that he's living in. I think this is the last one. Yes, it is. Peter is self-assured. We see him over and over, the one that gets out of the boat and walks on the water. You know, he is self-confident. And this really comes to play. The story I chose is when at the washing of the feet in John 13, Peter's the one that said, first of all, he wanted to reject the whole thing. No, I should be washing your feet. I mean, this is so human. So Jesus has to deal with this. Peter, sit down. Would you just sit down? And okay, I'll sit down, but if you're going to wash my feet, wash my whole body. Because Peter needs to be in control. He needs to bring what's outside of his experience into his realm of understanding. And so do I. I think that's such a graphic, oh, what a picture. And then on the right, the last contrast is he moves from being self-assured to self-preserved. I thought that was cute. John 18:17, Peter denies any association with Jesus. Number one, you know, he's at the plate and he's got 0 balls and 1 strike. And we'll see what happens. Not to blame Peter. I would I would act the same, I'm sure. So table time. And this is, we want to spend the rest of the time. We got some good time for discussion here. And when I wrote this question, I really drew it out widely to give you guys as much latitude as you can, or as we can. So a quick summary, Peter is experiencing quite the emotional ride. I think you can see that. And some subpoints under that is he moves from a state of courage, the prior Peter, to a state of cowardice. I wanted to use 2 C words, you know, there. And as we depict here, is cowardice is it's based on no, I don't know him. Move from a state of presence to a state of withdrawal. He's now trailing behind. He is moving from a state of solidarity, I'm with Jesus, I will lay down my life for you, to a state of denial. And here's the question. Here's the question for Peter, for you guys, to think about Peter, and indirectly or directly to think about us as followers of Jesus. Would you rate Peter's experience in this, like we've laid out today, would you rate it as good? Would you put a good marker on it, a thumbs up? Would it be a thumbs down? Peter's a bad Peter. bad Peter. Or neutral. It's just the way things are. I would love to hear your thoughts. How would you cast this story? Good, bad, or neutral? And then we can go from there.
Mike, when you say his experience, do you mean his response to the handmaid? Is that what you're?
Yeah, experience meaning his realm of what he's what he's actually doing.
Can you tighten that up to something more easily responded to? I mean, is it because he said to the handmaid, "I don't know him"? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, how I'm casting this is, at the Lord's Supper, Jesus made a prophecy that, okay, you'll lay down your life for me. Before the cock crows 3 times, you're going to deny me.
Right.
So that's the truth because Jesus knows human nature. And so this was round one, that when he is questioned by this unthreatening source, he denies Jesus, strike one. And so
I
that
don't know if it. I don't know if it was unthreatening. I mean, he knows what's going to be happening to Jesus. Um, Part of the culture was you saw how Rome responded to malefactors. They lined them up on the side of the road on a cross for everybody to look at as a warning. Don't rock the boat. This will happen to you. And it was like, stand back. I'm Rome. You're not. This is going to be the way I tell you it's going to be. And anything that you do that's different, we're going to take you and nail you to a tree. And now Jesus is experiencing that, or is about to be. He's being tried. And so Peter is being questioned. Are you with him? Are you part of this group that's challenging Rome? If so, you're next. So for Peter to say, I don't know this guy, I don't know who he is, it's emotionally disappointing to the readers. We look at it and say, I probably wouldn't do that. I'll never deny. But if you're in the moment and you're living in that culture, it's a reasonable thing to do. So I don't want to be swept up in Rome's power and crucified too. But I don't want to leave him alone. He's my friend. So I'm just going to hang out in the outskirts. I'm going to see what's going on. I want to kind of be part of this and be with him. But when someone says, "Are you with Jesus?" that carries a lot of consequence to it. It's more than admitting I go to his Bible study. It's like, are you challenging the authority of Rome too? Because if you are, we're going to crucify you next. It's a
so
big deal.
so you had asked me about Rate Peter's experience, and yes, I think the term, I didn't know what you were referring to first, but I think you're referring to the question. And response is a good. Is Peter's response actually? No, I wrote it experience because is what is happening to Peter. Let's look at it. His experience is what's happening to him. Is that good? Is that bad? Or is it neutral? Is what I'm asking. How do you depict it?
Yeah, there, I look at your question, Mike, and ponder it here. Um, my immediate response is um, Peter's experience or his response is very human.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and that doesn't put sort of a good, bad, or neutral label on it. Uh, but it is I can identify with it. And I think there I think there's we have a tendency to say, well, if the authorities came for me and asked me to deny my relationship with Jesus, what would I do? How would I respond? And you know, uh, books get published, you know, biographies, autobiographies of people who refuse to deny, and I like to think of myself as like, well, I would stand strong. I'd be willing, to let them. I would let them put the cuffs on on me and take me away to the cell. And then there's part of me that says, I'm not sure how I would respond. I suppose I don't know if I could walk on water that way. I won't know until I'm faced with it. I like to think that I know, but I don't. I'm a lot like Peter, I when I'm sitting here safe and warm in Fort Collins, Colorado, and no one's coming, for me. I, of course, I'm going to lay down my life for you, Jesus. But when they come knocking on the door, like they did for Father Ten Boom and Corey Ten Boom and that, what's going to be my response?
Thank you.
I don't know if I can jump to that square emotionally. I'm being sort of psychological about this.
Well, it's certainly, we can all, I think probably everybody on the call, we all identify with Peter. Peter made a self-created statement, I will never deny you. I will lay down my life for you. Okay. But when it really comes down to it, what we see is quite a different Peter. And I'm asking the question, is the process that he's in, is it good? Is it bad? Is he responding poorly because he's bad? It's bad, or is it neutral? I had to give that as a third option. And that's what we want to look at. We can all identify. We hope, like Steve, we hope we respond. But if we don't, why? We're going to see quite a different Peter. We have the luxury of knowing the Peter that's going to emerge out of the dust here. So we had an ordered Peter. His world was ordered. We're now seeing disorder. He is in chaos, and we're going to see a reordered Peter happening in the Gospels. And so, what is that all about? That's what I'm asking. Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it neutral? By the way, there's no, I mean, this is a discussion question.
So I think we forget the context where we are. This is the middle of the night, right? Been up all day.
Right.
Peter's been following Jesus, who he believes is the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God.
They've had Passover.
It's probably his fourth Passover with Jesus. And for the last couple months, Jesus has been saying things that don't register. But he said, Lord, I'll never, disown you. And so we're looking at this thing from a very human perspective, but his experience, I mean, you talk about courage. There's tons how did he get here, right? I mean, where are the rest of the guys? They're gone. So probably he and John probably, maybe dad wealthy, maybe connected to the Sanhedrin. John's in from what's called family connections. So John gets Peter in, and again, it's craziness, dark, cold, middle of the night.
Right.
And so this idea of being good or bad or neutral, I don't think it's neutral. I think it went from Peter's along for the ride. And will he look back on it as a bad experience? Well, sure. He denied, but as Vince was saying, in the middle of all this, it's survival. It's like I'm here to watch. If I say, yeah, I'm a follower, then he knows the next step for that. They're not just going to say, oh, that's nice. How did that go? Right? He's probably going to get looped right in with Jesus and end up on the fourth cross. But so this whole, how we view our own journey spiritually, and we go from this is where I was at the Last Supper, and this is where I am now. And did Peter stop believing in God? No, probably not, right? But he's definitely in a hole, so to speak. But he's there by his choosing, right? He didn't have to go in. He could have waited outside. So I would say there's a lot of courage as opposed to cowardice. And yeah, so that's my little feel on it.
Yeah. Yeah. What I hear you guys saying is that Peter is operating just like probably like you and I. I mean, I certainly see myself in the text. I would definitely be on the denial side. But the question is why? Because one, he's very self-assured, and now he's denying. And later, we're going to see a very different Peter. Tradition says Peter was crucified upside down. I mean, there's going to be something changed. And what is it? And where is he in that process? Thus, his experience. What I hear saying is that, Kyle, if I were in that situation, I would do that. But let's broaden it out a little bit. What is going on? What is happening in this very moment?
I kind of go along with what John was saying, or at least what I heard him say, is that the fact that Peter was even in the courtyard was a testament to his loyalty to Jesus and his courage, and that he chose to be there, not knowing in the moment how he's going to respond, but he was manifesting that I will never leave you kind of attitude. I'll be proximate to where you are. You're being tried by Pilate, but I'm in the courtyard. I didn't leave you alone. I think a lot of, in my experience, when you read the Bible, you kind of see what a manifestation of who you as the reader are.
Right.
I've heard many, many sermons about Peter walking on water, when Jesus bid him come unto me, and Peter walked on water. And then the minister makes a big deal out of Peter sinking. He lost his faith. Look at that. So he walked on water, for goodness sakes. I mean, let's not forget that. Yes, he sank, but he walked on water. He's one of two people in the Bible that did that. So let's give him a little bit of credit, as recognize who Peter is, that he had whatever it took to walk on water. He had whatever it took to go into the courtyard and to follow this persecuted Savior, and just to be there if he needed him, even though he knew functionally there was nothing he can do. But I'm not gonna leave you alone, Jesus. I'm not gonna redo the garden, pray with me. and come back here asleep. I'm not doing that again. I'm going to be here. But then when life hits you and someone says, "Are you with Jesus?" You got to make a decision, and life is the reality is hard. You know what's going to happen to you if you admit that I'm with Jesus. The very real possibility of being tortured and crucified is there. So for him to say, "I don't know him," I don't think is necessarily evidence of his failed character. I just think it's here's life again, it's a big deal. And what do we expect from another human being? I mean, this is just how humans are, you know. But he was there, so give him credit for that at least.
I,
I,
Dave, you go ahead.
I would posit here that a significant part of what is happening is that Peter is on the cusp once again of experiencing the supernatural versus the natural. And yet he's confused about it. Jesus has spent a great deal of time and effort trying to explain to Peter and the disciples what is coming and what's going to happen and what it's going to mean. And it takes our human existence out of the limitations of our human existence and opens the door to us through the power and presence of the Holy Spirit to experience more and more of who God is in real life when things get hard. And he's at a very hard moment. And and I think there's a part of him that says, well, Jesus has promised this stuff, but golly, so to me, I wish you hadn't said good, bad, or neutral down there, but I would say he's very human, very, very human. And I have shared this experience, personal experience before, and I want to emphasize, I want to share it again because I think um, it's germane. But I want to emphasize it's not about me. It's an example of what happens. Mike, you drew the horizontal of our experience, and that's kind of where we are. And when we get out of that,
Goes tilt.
it's different somehow or another. And yet, I think that's exactly what Jesus is asking us to do, is to get outside of that, especially when we need to or when he's asking us to. And the example that I want to use, which was certainly life-changing for me, and again, I've shared this story before, is when I sat on the floor happily at the feet of my daughter, who expressed and told us that she was pregnant. My little experience bar took a incredible shock. I mean, this is not right. This is not within the guide rails of
Right.
what it's all about here.
Right. Yep.
But I was not in control of my response. I
Right.
allowed the Holy Spirit at that moment, at that instant, to control how I reacted and what I said. And obviously, it made an incredible difference on on the future. That was 35 years ago.
Yeah. And you've never
So
forgotten
I think Peter is on the cusp of that similar experience as he's walking through this. It's a longer moment for him because he's in the courtyard and he's about to witness the crucifixion, but it's the same kind of thing where gradually it's sinking into him as, oh, he wants me. He doesn't want me within these narrow guardrails because he's taught me and he's sending me something that will enable me to meet any kind of human condition as he would have met it through love and positive experience.
it. Thank you, Dave.
Mike, real quick, I think this Jesus, have you described him, has operated up to this far out of strength. He's been a strong guy, right? And he's approached things, like you said, the sergeant, in control, strong, right? And all of a sudden, right, I'm sure he said to John, they said, John, why in the, now he may have been dead by the time John writes this, but why'd you include that in your gospel? Come on, right? That's a bad light on me, man, right? Why can't you just let it go and skip over that part, right? But for him, it was a failure, um, a real awakening to weakness, right? I'm not who I thought I was, right? And I denied him. I should have just not said anything or backed out for a bit. Anyway, the point is that this will mark him in terms of his own ability to run on his own steam. And you said what makes looking ahead to John 21, it's the supernatural, as Dave's talking about, this connection, the spirit, and this connection that makes him a changed person in the end. But he comes to the end of himself, and this is a rude awakening to who he thought he was. And so, anyway, that's is it good, bad? I guess at the minute it was bad, but at the minute, right? Because it was good up until he denied, right? The idea that he got there is crazy. But afterwards, he'll look back on this. It'll take him a while to recoup. And yeah, he'll be a different person because of a supernatural um,
And
experience.
therein we come to the end of ourselves over and over and over again as we grow.
We see it happening right before our eyes. Our earlier discussion was centered on, well, don't be so hard on Peter. He's not a coward. I know he's not a coward. He's human. Well, he was there. We got to give him some credit for that. But I think we need to look deeper than that. He is human. You and I are human. But as uh, Dave opened up this, and then John, you commented on it. There is something, and I would put it in the category as very good, happening to Peter at this moment. Now, it doesn't look good, but Peter needs to die. Peter's been operating out of power of this world. Peter is used to firing Peter bullets and getting his world into compliance with what he thinks. And that needs to die. And we're seeing it happening right before our eyes. It's not a bad Peter. It's certainly not neutral. But the creator of all things is allowing this to happen at this moment, entirely demonstrating kingdom power. And that is also happening in the life of Peter right before our eyes. Peter needs to learn a new power, an entirely different way. And that power, as Jesus said, is not of this world. My default mode of thinking, well, I don't want to be too hard on this guy. I would probably deny him. Yes, I would. But we're going to see a changed Peter. And we're going to see Peter be given an entirely different set of clubs that he's operating out of, as being demonstrated right now through the person of Jesus, as he allows himself for this to happen.
I'm just try to make this quick because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But my rate Peter's experience here as good
Me too.
for later on when he's confronted with witnessing and whatever, thousands of people, all the experience that he goes on later on. This experience here was good because he could identify with what those people have to go, the barriers that they have to go through down the road. So that's my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Totsi. And I that's where I land too. I think there is nothing out of control here in is from Jesus's perspective. And what's happening to Peter needs to happen.
Yeah.
Peter operating with Peter bullets and Peter power That's got to die so that real Peter can live. Thank you, guys. We'll get next week. We'll be together the 23rd, and we'll carry on this idea. It's happening right before our eyes. We'll see you next week.